de dois institutos hoje, um evento um pouco diferente, uma parceria do Líderes do Amanhã com a galera do IBF Academy. Então, tem alguns aqui que são dos dois institutos. Espero muito, falando como presidente do IBF Academy, que essa parceria possa se repetir em outros eventos, Henrique, que acho que agrega valor a todos, tá? Hoje a gente tem um evento extraordinário para os dois institutos, em que a gente tem ninguém mais, ninguém menos do que Yaron, Brook. Como que vai funcionar? Eu vou falar rapidamente, tá? Fazer o meu briefing rapidamente. Depois o Yaron vai ter 40 minutos, meio de uma palestra. Ele vai focar em egoísmo racional e individualismo. Eu combinei isso com ele. E depois, as outras 1h20, 1h10 aí que a gente vai ter, o objetivo é fazer um bate-papo. A gente recebeu muitas perguntas no Slido. Eu recebi também algumas perguntas por fora do Slido. Sempre que alguém quiser tecer algum comentário sobre aquela pergunta, sobre aquele tema que está rolando, levanta a mão, que eu vou estar aqui olhando. Então, a gente vai permitir esse debate. Óbvio que se o debate naquele assunto estiver se estendendo demais, eu vou dar uma segurada para a gente poder ir para outros assuntos, para a gente poder tentar explorar ao máximo aqui dessa situação, enfim, extraordinária que a gente está tendo. Beleza? Então, vamos lá começar. Vou voltar aqui agora para o inglês. So, Yaron, here I am back. So, my introduction is based on what Yaron had changed in my life 2 years ago when he came for a speech for the Institute Leaders of Tomorrow. And I was brand new studying.
Isso aí, por isso que assim, eu não...
Galera, por favor, deixa o áudio fechado. Okay, so he made a very important speech, which basically changed my life, because I was in the beginning of my studies in Leaders of Tomorrow, and he said a lot about individualism and rational self-interest. And after that, and with the studies of Leaders of Tomorrow, my whole professional and my whole personal life changed, because I learned how to fight my biggest villain, myself. I knew how to love my biggest love, myself. How to have my biggest fears put apart, and my biggest fear was myself. So once I had the power to understand the power of myself, I started changing my life. I started being a better human being, a better professional, a better lover, a better man. And everything it did was make me happier. And something else that it did was to create value. I started creating value for my life. And that's why I was happier, because I felt more confident. I felt better. I felt stronger. I felt more intelligent, because I started to believing myself. So what I hope that Yaron is able to do is to change your minds the same way he did mine. I hope he is the beginning of a new life of yourselves, thinking about yourselves, because what he did to me was made me a better myself. Thank you. Yaron now is with you. For everyone to know, Yaron is the host on the Yaron Brook Show, which is including broadcasting this meeting tonight. He's a writer. He's the chairman of the board of the Ayn Rand Institute. And I could say a lot more about him, but we aligned that we were going to say this, so we have more time. So Yaron, thank you very much in the name of both institutes. And please, give it a shot.
Thank you, Marcelo, for inviting me to do this. And it's great to hear that it had such a profound impact on your life. That is, it makes what I do worth it. It's why I do it. And also, I'm sorry I'm not there in person. This would be a lot more fun if we were sitting somewhere in Vitoria and actually talking face to face. I would enjoy that more, and I'm sure you would enjoy that more. And one of these days, I promise that we will do that. So, when the madness in the world subsides, I will be visiting Brazil again, and I'll make sure to come and visit you guys in Vitoria. So, you know, when we're little, when we're young, we are raised with a particular view of the world. We're raised with a particular view of what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, what is moral, what is ethical. We're told, at least my mother taught me, think of other people first. Think of the concerns of other people. Don't think of yourself first. Don't pursue the things that are important to you. Think about the impact you're having. Think about what you can do to help other people. The heroes we are taught to admire, the moral heroes, the ethical heroes, are all people who sacrifice themselves for the sake of other people. They're all people who live for the sake of benefiting other people. That is their whole focus in life, is others, how to make other people's lives better. That we are taught by our mothers, our philosophers, our religious leaders. That is the essence of good, serving other people. But you have to ask yourself one question. And that is a simple one. It's why? Why should I live for other people? Why are other people more important than me? Why is the happiness of others more important than me? And if I help them become happy, why are they happy? Shouldn't they then be sacrificing to the next person and the next person sacrificing to the next? Why is your life not as valuable as your neighbor's? Why is sacrifice noble and good? Why should the heroes, the great heroes, be people who sacrifice their life, sacrifice their values? For the sake of what? And there really is no answer to that why. There is no reason your life is not as important or more important to you than other people's lives. After all, you only live once. You've only got one shot at this life. You've got one opportunity to make the most of it. You don't get to do it over. And you're the one who's alive. Why not live the best life that you can live? What other purpose is there in being alive than to make the most of it? To live for the sake of your own happiness, for the sake of your own fulfillment, for the sake of your own well-being. Now, we'll get to this. That doesn't mean you have to treat other people badly. But notice that that's also what we were taught when we were very young. We were taught that good kids, good people, good heroes sacrifice for others, worry about other people's happiness, focus their efforts on other people's values. Bad kids are selfish. And what do we mean by selfish? We mean they lie, they steal, they cheat. They'll do anything to get their way. So we're faced with this alternative. You can be good, and that means sacrifice, and that means thinking of other people, and that means being selfless, no self, no focus on self. Everything is oriented outside, externally, and that will make you moral and virtuous and noble and a hero, maybe, if you do enough of it. That's Mother Teresa, right? Or you can be a lying, cheating, stealing SOB, right? If you don't know what SOB is, you can ask me in the question. Right? You can be a bad person. You can be horrible to other people. So the two options are, I can sacrifice to other people, or I can force other people to sacrifice to me, or expect other people to sacrifice to me. Those are the two alternatives we are presented with. To be sacrificial animals, or to sacrifice other people to ourselves. And Ayn Rand teaches us that there's a third alternative. The third alternative is neither to sacrifice yourself to other people or sacrifice other people to you. Not exploit them and not have them be exploited either. That is, the ideal is to live a life where you're pursuing your own happiness, you're pursuing your own well-being, you're pursuing your own values, and you're treating other people as a trader treats other people. You're treating other people as a value. And we can talk about this, but part of being self-interested, part of being focused in your own life and maximizing your own well-being and living a life of happiness and living the best life that you can, part of that is, a big part of it is, creating as many win-win relationships with other people, good people, as possible. Win-win relationship means you benefit and they benefit. And remember, that's the opposite of sacrifice, because what does a sacrifice mean? What does a sacrifice mean? How is that different than a trade? How does that different than win-win? A sacrifice is where one party loses. Or when one party uses, usually what happens long run is both parties lose. So you've got, 4 different types of relationships, right? Win-win, win-lose, lose-win, or lose-lose. One way to think about how to live your life is no lose-lose, no lose-win, no win-lose. Make all your relationships in your life win-win. That way you're always moving forward. You're always in a better position. Because any kind of win-lose relationship where you win and the other party loses ultimately is a lose-lose. Think about in business. If you negotiate a deal with your supplier and you screw them, and you know you're screwing them, you give them too low of a price that can make a profit, they lose, you win. They're not going to make any deals with you again. They're going to let other people know that you screwed them. Other people won't make deals with you again. Or think about in your personal life. Think about, with your spouse. You do something where they lose and you win. How long are they going to let that pass before they make your life miserable and before you lose as well? So lose-win, where one party loses and one party wins, usually end up as lose-lose. But the focus should be on you, in a sense, winning. And what I mean by winning is making your life better, moving yourself further along in pursuit of your values, in pursuit of the things that you believe are necessary for your happiness. So Rand teaches us that the moral purpose, the ethical purpose of your life should be your happiness, your well-being, your flourishing, your success at living the best life that you can live. Now, how do you do that? Because we don't know how to do that automatically. I mean, even at the very basic level of just surviving, never mind happy or flourishing. As human beings, we don't know how to survive. We're not born with that knowledge. We don't have it encoded in our genes. If I take any one of you and drop you in the Amazon naked, you don't have the instincts necessary to survive. You will die unless you do one thing. What is the one thing that would allow you to survive in Amazon or pretty much anywhere? What's the one thing that allows human beings to thrive and survive and live? How did we, as a species, how did we get to where we are today? I mean, think about it. A few thousand years ago, we had nothing. We lived in little huts. We hunted. Maybe we farmed. Maybe we had some animals. That was it. Today, we're zooming across continents. We're talking across continents We've got computers that even 100 years ago, people could barely imagine could exist. Never mind 1,000 years ago, 5 or 10,000 years ago. We live in comfortable homes with air conditioning. We travel by airplanes. I mean, we live such amazing lives today. From the perspective of history, it's unbelievable. How did we get here? What is it that human beings have to do in order to survive and in order to thrive, in order to build skyscrapers, in order to build airplanes, in order to create Zoom, but even at the very basic level, in order to hunt? We don't have the gene for hunting. We're a pretty pathetic animal. I mean, if you look around the Zoom, you can see people's faces. You can't see. I mean, we're a pretty pathetic animal. Look at us. We're slow. We have no claws. We have no fangs. You try running down a bison or another animal and biting into it. We can't do it. The only way we can survive is by using our mind, by using our brain, by using our capacity to reason, to observe the world, understand it, integrate it, form more abstract concept from it, accumulate knowledge, apply that knowledge to new ideas, to new areas of life, adapt the environment to fit our needs. So if you had to think of one value, one principle that would guide life for everybody, a universal principle that would lead to a successful, prosperous life, that would lead us to live a good life, both materially and spiritually, it would be use your mind. It would be use your reason. Be rational. So reason is, for Ayn Rand, for Objectivism, the cardinal value. It's the most important value you can have because everything else is dependent on it. And indeed, what's really at the heart dependent on it is our survival. We cannot survive unless we think. We cannot survive unless we use our mind to solve problems. The problems that reality throws at us constantly. And the primary problem is just the basics of survival. Beyond that, it's, okay, but survival, I've survived. Now, how do I live well? Well, you have to use this in order to figure it out. So for Objectivism, in Ayn Rand's philosophy, to be selfish, to be self-interested, means to think. It means to use your mind in pursuit of the values, the rational values, the logical values, the values that are going to lead to your happiness. And you can only discover those values by, again, using your mind, observing the world out there, figuring out what's good for you, what's bad for you, what enhances your life, what hurts your life, and pursuing that which promotes your life, which makes your life better. So the cardinal value, the most important value, is reason. Now, you have to think about what is implied by reason in our day-to-day activities. What is implied by rationality in how we live our lives? And those are kind of the other virtues, moral virtues, universal principles that should guide a rational, egoistic life. For example, what we talked about a few minutes ago. In dealing with other people, how should we deal with them? Well, the way we were taught was sacrifice to them or sacrifice them to you. But a rational person says, wait a minute. One of the beauties of life is that we're all different. We all specialize in different things. We all have different skills, different talents, different abilities. I specialize in one thing, you specialize in something else. And one of the things we discovered very early on as human beings, that if we specialize, we can then become very good at what we do, and then we can trade. We can exchange product for product, ability for ability. So A healthy way of dealing with one another is through trade. And trade is a universal principle. And you can see every successful civilization in human history has been a trading civilization, has been a civilization engaged in some form, some level of division of labor economically and trade. And in some way or another treated every individual as an individual, and the way they related to one another was through value for value. Value for value. So the way to treat other people is based on kind of what they do for you, right? You don't marry just any girl if you're a guy, right? You marry the girl that makes you feel the best. You marry the girl that makes you feel amazing about yourself. Love, think about love. Love is the most self-interested of all emotions. Because love is a response to somebody else. It's the way they make you feel about you. Imagine, I mean, Ayn Rand uses this example. Imagine, this philosophy of selflessness teaches us that love is selfless, right? Love is selfless. So imagine going up to your bride-to-be the day before you're going to get married, and you say to her, this is completely selfless. You do nothing for me. I'm doing this purely out of selflessness. You contribute nothing to my life. I'm doing this all for you. Well, I mean, the rational response for her would be to slap you in the face. Because the reverse of that is to go up to your wife-to-be and say, you make me feel great about the world, about myself. You contribute immensely to my life. You make my life, for me, better by every dimension. That's love. That's romantic. That's selfish. It's about me. So you treat other people based on how much they contribute to you, how much they contribute to your life. Economically, you pay productive employees more than you pay unproductive employees. In relationships, if you really, really like somebody, they become your friend. If you don't like them that much, they're an acquaintance. If you hate them, you stay away from them. You treat them based on their contribution to your life. That's what self-interest requires. And if you fall in love with them, you marry them. Assuming they love you as well. That's always an advantage. So that's how you deal with other people if you're self-interested. What about this idea of, lying? Somebody who is, we often get this, if you're self-interested, you just lie to everybody. But does lying work? Does lying lead to more happiness? Does lying lead to better relationships? Does lying lead to better friendship? Does lying lead to better business deals? Does lying lead to a better sense about yourself? No. Lying is unbelievably self-destructive. I mean, just do an experiment. An experiment could be, I see Claudia raised her hand. I'll take questions after I finish. So, I agreed with Marcelo. I'll go for 40 minutes, and then I'll open it up to any questions you had. So save the questions, Claudia, and I'll take it afterwards. So, lying. Lying never works. I mean, you can do this experiment. Take a friend of yours and lie to them for a day. I mean, it's not a good idea. Nothing good can come of it. You lose trust. You're almost always caught. And you know that you're living untruth. And why is living untruth bad? Well, let's go back to the first point we made. The thing, the most necessary for human survival is to use our mind. It's to be rational. What does being rational mean? It means only accepting facts. It means only pursuing the truth. It means only going by what you know is real. Not going by emotion. Emotions are, you want to identify your emotions, you want to feel your emotions, you want to recognize your emotions, but emotions are not tools of decision making. And you know that because every time you've gotten into trouble, it's because you followed your emotions and you didn't do the thinking. I mean, all of us have experienced that. Reason requires that we be committed to truth. We be committed to facts. We be committed to reality. Reason requires that we never fake it. We never pretend. And that's true with ourselves. The most important person in your life not to lie to is you. The most important person not to lie to is you, because that undercuts your rationality. And if you're not going to lie to you, and if you're committed to facts and reality, why would you lie to anybody else? Lying just doesn't make any sense. So, in Ayn Rand's moral theory, or honesty is a crucial virtue. To be honest is to be selfish. And to be dishonest is to be selfless or self-destructive. It's bad for you. And you want to avoid things that are bad for you. So you want to treat people based on what they deserve, which we'll call justice. You want to treat yourself. You want to be honest to yourself and to everybody around you. And you can ask me questions about honesty. You want to live your values. You want to pursue them consistently. In other words, you want to have integrity. You want to be a thinker in every aspect of your life. A thinker. And that means you have to be an independent person. You can't rely on other people to do your thinking for you. You cannot rely on other people to do your thinking for you. It's not thinking. You're responsible for your own life. Nobody else is. You're responsible for doing the thinking for you. So you have to be independent. And crucially, you have to earn your life. In other words, you have to be productive. You have to go out there and produce the material needs that you need in order to consume. You can't be a leech or a parasite on other people. Nobody owes you anything. But more importantly than that, you owe yourself. You owe yourself to use your mind to the best of your ability to produce the things that you need in order to live the best life you can live. And to do that, you have to choose a profession. You have to choose a career. And you have to pursue that career rationally with your full focus and your full energy and make the most of it and integrate your values in a way that produce a consistent whole around your life, your career, your pursuits, the things that make you happy. If we don't produce, we can't live. So think about people who steal. Think about people who steal and think they're living. Stealing is not living. Stealing is an admission to yourself that you cannot produce for yourself. Stealing means you need other people to produce for you. All you can do is use your muscle, force, a gun to take. But it means you've defaulted on your responsibility to use your mind to produce what you need in order to live for yourself. So to be productive, to work, to earn your own way is essential for a happy life. And finally, I'll just mention one more. You know, in most moral theories, and certainly in Christianity, pride is considered a vice. But if you're truly self-interested, pride is a virtue. What does pride mean? Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, called pride the queen of the virtues. Because what pride means is a commitment to being excellent. It means a commitment to being the best that you can be. A commitment to being moral, a commitment to taking your life seriously. And it means the recognition that you can do that, and the recognition that you should do that. And you will not compromise in doing it. So, to be proud of a job well done is, I think, really important. And we want employees, and we tell our employees, we tell our children, when they succeed at something, we say, you should be proud of that. Or I'm proud of you. But what pride as a moral virtue means, as an ethical virtue, what it means is the pride of living a successful life. The commitment to live a successful life. You want your employees to do a good job and be proud of it. Well, you want yourself to live a good life and be proud of it. That is a life well lived. So, to be a rational egoist means to live life on your own terms, to choose your own values, to use these universal principles, which I think work for everybody, and apply them to the specifics of your life, your situation, your passions, your interests, your values. And to pursue it consistently, to live for those values, with the idea that happiness, success, flourishing is the purpose of it all. That's what you're living for. It's, again, not to sacrifice to others, not to live for the group, not to live for other people, but to live for yourself. Now, I want to take this idea and connect it to individualism, which is a little different, because individualism is not an ethical theory. In a sense, individualism is the bridge to a political theory. What individualism says is that what matters is the individual. It's the ability of the individual to be successful. What matters politically is the ability of the individual to be successful. And what we should do is create a political system that leaves individuals free to be successful. Now, what does success require? We talked about this. Success requires that you be able to pursue your own self-interest by using your mind, by using your reason, by using your ability to think, and by pursuing your values. So what kind of political system allows individuals to think, to pursue their values, to make choices about career, about friends, about what to do every day with what is theirs? Because that is the political system that would be consistent with a morality of self-interest. That would be a political system of individualism. And the key concept politically for such a political system is the concept of individual rights. Individual rights are the idea that your life is yours. It's the idea that you should be free to pursue your values based on your thinking. And individual rights say the one thing that interferes with your ability to pursue your life, the one thing that can interfere with your ability to use your mind to discover your values and to pursue those values, to act in achieving those values, what's the one thing that can stop that? What's the one thing that can halt that? Well, it's force. It's coercion. It's people using force to stop you, using force to prevent you from acting, to prevent you from thinking, to prevent you from doing what you think is in your self-interest. So politically, what we want is a society in which people cannot use force against you, cannot constrain your thinking, cannot constrain your actions. And as long as you're not inflicting force on them, then you should be left alone. You should be left free to pursue your values. So politically, individualism requires a political system that protects your rights as an individual, your individual rights. And that political system is capitalism. Capitalism, by definition, is the political system that protects individual rights, where the government does protect your rights and otherwise leaves you free, leaves you alone to pursue your rational self-interest, to pursue your own thinking, your own values, your own life. So capitalism rests on a foundation of individual rights. Individual rights, or of individualism, rests on a foundation of a morality of self-interest, a morality that says that your life is your purpose, your happiness is your moral purpose, your survival is what determines every single value you have, you pursue. And that rests on the idea that man's means of survival, the way you survive, thrive, succeed in life, is by using your mind. So if you think about a morality like that, the way we raise our kids changes. The people we consider heroes changes. Like for me, as an egoist, when I think of heroes, I think of people who have contributed the most to my life. Mother Teresa, and not just to my life, but to the life of other rational, productive people in the world. I think of who out there has made the world a better place for me to live in. And that's not Mother Teresa. She did nothing to make the world a better place to live in for most of us. So she did very little, if she did anything. But you know, Steve Jobs did a lot. For me, Steve Jobs is a hero. Bill Gates, Rockefeller, JP Morgan. I don't have any names of Brazilian businessmen available right now. But to me, businessmen are moral heroes because they make everything around us possible. They've created the modern world. They've created the values that we all are necessary for all of our survival. We couldn't be doing this Zoom without entrepreneurs that created Zoom, the internet, and all the technologies that make this possible. The camera that I have in front of me, the monitor, the computer, all of this is a product of entrepreneurial activity. And to me, that is what's heroic. If we're going to build monuments to heroes, I would love to see monuments to entrepreneurs, to business leaders, to people who actually change the world. And by the way, make the world a better place for other people. Make the world a better place for other people. But they get no credit for that. Why? Why don't they get any credit for that? They don't get any credit for it because they made money doing it. They don't get any credit for it because they were self-interested when they did it. They didn't sacrifice. You see, the fact is that in the world we live, it's not about how much good you do for other people. It's how much pain and suffering you inflict on yourself, how much sacrifice you engaged in. The reason Mother Teresa is a moral hero is not because of how many people she helped. She didn't help that many people. It's because of how much she suffered doing it. The reason Bill Gates is not a moral hero, in spite of the fact that he has helped hundreds of millions of people, not in his philanthropy, I'm talking about in Microsoft, is because he didn't suffer doing it. Indeed, he made money doing it. He made his life better off by doing it. And that's the real sin. The real sin in our world is to enjoy yourself. The real sin in our world is to make money. The real sin in our world is to do good for yourself. The real sin in our world is to be self-interested. The real people who really change the world, make the world a better place, help people, are the self-interested ones, are the ones who make a profit doing it. Think about how many lives are better off because of the technology we have around us, because some self-interested entrepreneur started a company and made lots of money doing it. Our lives are better. So what we need desperately, I think, in this world is a revolution. What we need in this world is a moral revolution. We need to plant the seeds like I did with Marcelo, the seeds of self-interest, the seeds that challenge the convention, the seeds that challenge the conventional wisdom of selflessness. I think the world would be 100 times better if it was dominated by self-interested people. And if we eliminated the idea of sacrifice from human existence. Thank you, and we'll take questions now.
Well, Yaron, you just planted another seed on me. Actually, I think you throw a lot of water in it so it can grow even better and better and better.
Go. Excellent.
This finish was oof. So
Good.
Let's go to some of the questions. As I said before, if someone wants to comment or debate something that we're talking from the questions that I'm going to make right now, please raise your hand, and then we're going to go do this debate. Okay. So I have a question here. Actually, all the questions that I have, they are thankfully related to your speech. But there is one here that you mentioned a little bit of it in the beginning. It is okay. So how does individualism, rational self-interest, libertarianism, and values of Ayn Rand comment on religious values of altruism found in the teachings of the major religions on earth? Where did she come up with? Was she a scientist, a believer in God, an atheist? How did she create this? I mean,
So let me first start by saying I wouldn't conflate all those terms. Libertarianism is not rational self-interest. Many libertarians are altruists. Many libertarians are anti-Ayn Rand, anti-self-interest, anti-individualism even. So libertarianism is a political philosophy.
Okay.
And that's being generous because it's really a political umbrella group for lots of different political philosophies. Okay. It's generally pro-free market. So the question is, how does rational self-interest view religious morality, and in particular altruism? It rejects religious morality. It rejects altruism. Altruism is a morality of death. Altruism is a morality of sacrifice. Altruism is a morality of destruction. And I know Brazil is a pretty religious country, so I have to be careful. So nothing I say here is meant to insult anybody.
Be free.
Yes, but
speak your mind.
Think about the Christian moral hero. Who is the moral hero for Christianity? Or as Jordan Peterson calls him, the superhero, the first superhero. Well, it's Jesus. And what happens to Jesus? Jesus dies a brutal, horrible, painful, the worst kind of death possible. It's torture, like being crucified. I mean, you die slowly in pain. It's horrible. Does he die for something he did? Does he die because he was a bad person? No. He dies for your sins. He dies for other people's sins. The ultimate sacrifice. And my answer to that is a travesty. That's unjust. Why should Jesus die for my sins? I understand why I should die for my sins if my sins are bad enough. But why should Marcelo suffer for my sins? Why should anybody else suffer for my sins? And why should I suffer for your sins? The whole basis of Christianity, in my view, is an injustice. It's based on the idea that we are our brother's keeper, that we are responsible for other people. It's hard enough being responsible for yourself. And if each one of us is responsible for ourselves, then the world would be a much, much better place. So Ayn Rand rejected Christian morality and all its various secular forms. She rejected the idea that one person should live for the sake of another person. You deal with other people through trade. You deal with other people voluntarily, but without sacrifice. Without sacrifice. And again, sacrifice is where you give up something and get something of less value in return or no value in return. You get nothing in return, but you're giving up stuff. It's much, much better to live a life where you give something up and you get something of greater value in return. That's what a trade is. I give something up and I get something more valuable to me in return. Now, where did she come up with this? She's a philosopher. She discovered it. She discovered a truth about human life and about morality. And the way she really thought about it, I don't want to get technical, philosophically technical with you, but the way she thought about it was this. You know, we talk about values, but where do these values come from, right? And the values come from a fundamental choice that every human being has to make. In a sense, there's really one choice at the root of all value choices that we all have to make. All human beings, indeed all living beings, face an alternative. The alternative is life or death, existence or non-existence. The reason we have to choose values is in order to live. If you make the choice not to live, values are irrelevant. Nothing's relevant. Morality is irrelevant. But once you choose to live, now the question is, how should I live? But how should who live? Me. How should I live? The focus from the beginning when making these kind of decisions is me. Because if I'm not alive, nothing else matters. Nothing else is relevant. Nothing else has significance. So everything starts with the choice to live. And then the question is, well, what kind of values do I need to pursue in order to live? Right? So she's a philosopher who derived her moral code from reality, from the choice to live and the values necessary in order to live. Right? She was an atheist, as am I, because she rejected anything that was mystical, which means anything that's unreasonable, anything that goes against reason, anything that denies reason. Right? So she was an atheist philosopher and a novelist. She wrote novels.
Yeah, okay, that's perfect. It really answered the question that I wanted. So
good.
I have a question here before going to the slide do questions. I talked to two people during this week that they're going to have a debate next week on leaders of tomorrow. So I'm going to have a question of each of them. Okay. So
sure.
The first one is from Hélio Pepe, our former president. It's a little bit long, the introduction, but to make sense. So I'm just going to read it. Okay. Sure. So his question is about family in the objectivist view. Hélio says that Rand's theoretical construction, especially in her novels, does not present much of her view of children, which has already caused some questions about whether individualism would rule out the possibility of having children, a topic on which I have already seen a video of you about this matter. Making it clear that she only recognized the responsibility of a child and chose to dedicate herself above labor. On the other hand, Nassim Taleb, when talking about the relationship of man with society, says that it is a moral being, a libertarian in relation to the government and less libertarian in other layers of social relations. even a socialist with your family. So how do you evaluate objectivism in the individual's relationship with his family? Is it correct to say that we should be socialists in the family environment? How to combine the responsibility of the conscious parent with the freedom of the young man who is developing his conscience and criticality? That's a big one. If you need anything,
yes, I think I understand it, but let me say, I think it's a disaster to think of family as socialist. Family is not socialist. You are not sacrificing for your kids. Your kids, hopefully, you shouldn't have a kids otherwise, are of value to you. They're important to you. And if they're not, don't have kids. You shouldn't have kids because it's your obligation to have kids, or because society expects you to have kids, or because you want to sacrifice for somebody, so you're going to have kids so you can sacrifice for somebody. Socialism is a political theory. It doesn't apply in the family. Socialism is about the state owning the means of production. There's no state in the family. Socialism is about taking from those who have to give to those who have not. There's no taking in a family.
And what does it happen? Just to make it clear, sure, because we talked about it before, what does it happen and how do we see it when we have a central power, which are the parents, that even by coercion or force.
There is some coercion, right? Because sometimes you have to discipline your kids, and sometimes you have to prevent them from running into the streets. And sometimes, so there's definitely coercion as a parent that you inflict on your children. It's part of the job of a parent to discipline your children. It doesn't mean slap them, right? But it means you hold them, you protect them, you discipline them. You might have to put them in a room, lock them in a room, right? You might have to time out or whatever, however you discipline your kids, right? That is coercion. And that's okay, because it's part of what parents do. But look, when you decide to have kids, you have to go through the process of deciding it's important to you. And I think every parent should think, why am I having kids? And it's not obvious what the answer to that is, because a lot of people decide, you know what, I don't want kids. As you know, most of you have children. Kids are a lot of work, really, really, really hard work, a huge amount of energy, huge. So you better really want them if you're going to devote that kind of resources to them. And if you don't have them. Like, I know your parents want to be grandparents, so they put pressure on you. But so first you have to figure out that I want children. And then you have to figure out, why do I want them? And am I willing, for this value, having a child, give up all this other stuff? Like hundreds of thousands of dollars, sleepless nights, and huge amount of mental capacity. And if the answer is yes, then in a sense, you're signing a contract. You're saying, I'm willing, I want this kid, and in exchange, I'm willing to give all this stuff. For 18 years, I am taking responsibility for this human being. No changing your mind. Just like when you sign a business contract. And in the middle of the business contract, you might say, the terms weren't good. I don't like this contract anymore. I want to walk away. Tough. You got to do it. That's what contracts mean. You got to live it through, right? So with children, it is a very, very long-term, even a marriage, you can get divorced. You can't divorce your children. It's an 18-year contract. So make sure you want to do it. And then your job, if you will, is to help them become independent human beings. And all you can do is help, because it's up to them to become independent human beings. They have free will. They're not going to do what you tell them, right? They're going to make choices for themselves. You have to clothe them and feed them and educate them and provide the best that you can to make them individual human beings, independent of you. The whole point of having kids so that they can leave.
Right. If
they don't leave, you failed, right? Even if they leave, you might have failed. But If they don't leave, you definitely failed, right? So and hopefully you enjoy it, right? You have fun with it, right? I mean, I love children. I love kids. You know, I enjoyed having kids. So you've got to get something in return. Again, there's a trade. The trade is you had a child. That's what you get. What you give is 18 years of hard work.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. So the other guy is Brook, and his question is, I'm pretty sure, is very related to what came out this week on US regarding the PPP and the Ayn Rand Institute having it. And we discussed it a lot, so it'll be great to hear your thoughts about it. So his question is, and then you can use some of your time, okay, to talk about this, because everyone's gonna love to hear what you have to say. So, considering that government does not make savings and necessarily needs to appropriate by strength or coercion of the wealth of others, to what extent can a person accept privilege from the government, being fully aware that other people will be plundered so that the government can comply with this benefit?
So the only case in which it's okay for you to accept a benefit from the government is if you fight against the plunder, right? So precondition of being willing to accept the benefit is that you reject the plunder and you fight against it. The fact is the plunder happens anyway. The plunder's happening. It's not like they first ask you, Yaron, do you want to benefit? And you say, yeah, I want to benefit. And then they go plunder somebody, right? First, they steal people's money. And then they say, who are we going to give this to? It would be absurd if then you said, only the socialists should get the plunder. Only the socialists should get it. Wait a minute. The government plundered me. It stole my stuff. It reduces my quality of life and standard of living. I can't even imagine by how much, because of how it regulates the economy, how it controls everything. It just forced me into lockup in the United States for weeks and weeks and weeks, right? Basically couldn't leave my home, couldn't do my business. So the government is an agent that oppresses me and steals from me. And I'm going to say no when some of that money comes back to me. So I consider taking money from the government in these circumstances, reparations, restitution, getting some of my money back for all the plundering the government has done to me. The problem is the socialist or the somebody else, just a common person out there. He doesn't view it as getting his money back. He views it as a right. He views it as, yeah, of course the government should take care of me. And he encourages the government to do more plundering and to go and do more and more and more. He has no right to the money because he is the one that made the plundering possible to begin with. I am begging the government, please don't plunder me. Please don't plunder anybody. I've got a whole system of running an economy without any plundering. And I provide it to you and I help you and I argue for it and I educate people about it. And they still steal my money. They still reduce my standard of living. They still pull controls of my life. And now they take some of my money together with everybody else's money and they're giving it back a piece to me. And I say, no, I don't want it. It's my money. Why wouldn't I take it? So my view is you should take it. You should view it as getting your money back, money that was plundered from you. And you should view other people accepting it who are fighting, arguing for more plunder as the ones who are immoral and wrong. I mean, I have paid in my life much, much, much more taxes than the Ayn Rand Institute got in PPP. So just think of it as me getting some of my money back and donating it to the Ayn Rand Institute. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And when I was talking to Bubak about it. He said that because, well, we all seen the response that Ayn Rand Institute gave and everything. We studied a lot, as I said. He asked, and he made a construction like this. So, considering that the money that was taken for you from the Ayn Rand Institute, from you, from me, from everyone, has already gone, was used for something, right? That's basically because they don't save. They don't save the money. The government doesn't save the money.
Sure.
So when they give money back and we consider it a restitution or giving it back to us, we have to consider that this money that's being given to us is going to be paid by someone else.
Well, not necessarily. I'm still being taxed. My contributors at the Ayn Rand Institute are still being taxed. My employees at the Ayn Rand Institute are still being taxed. It's still being taken from them. And look, the fact that they've already spent it is their problem, not mine.
Right.
They stole my money. I want it back. I don't care where they get it. It's my money, right? And I particularly care less about where they get it when I consider that they're taking it from people who want to be plundered. I don't want to be plundered. Not only do those people want to be plundered themselves, but most of those people want me to be plundered even more, right? Because I happen to make more money, right? So I should be plundered. So so take Social Security in America, for example. Social Security in America, the way it works is that you pay into the system, the government takes the money and it gives it to old people. And then when you become old, they take the money from young people and they give it to you. So what? When I get old, I'm going to say, no, I don't want the money because I don't want you to plunder young people. Now, this is what I am willing to say. I'm willing to say, I don't want the money as long as nobody gets money and you stop plundering the young people, right? But they're not going to stop plundering the young people if I say I'm not going to take money. They're still going to plunder them and give the money I would have got to somebody else. So the plundering doesn't stop if I don't take the money. If the government came to me and said, we'll give you money, but we have to steal it from Joe, then I said, well, of course I don't want it. But if the government comes to me and said, we're stealing money from Joe and everybody else, and you, Yaron, as well, do you want some of it? Yeah, of course I want some of it. It's my money.
Perfect. I gotta say that I agree 100%. So Janilo here, he asks on the chat, how do we break this cycle? Is there any way that we break this cycle? What's the answer? I mean, if there is even one.
Well,
more education to people so they think like us and stop and then create a good cycle, a virtual cycle, a virtue of cycle.
Yes. I mean, the only way to do it is education, education, education. And the cycle is a moral cycle, an ethical cycle. It's what we talked about before. And that's why it's so hard to break. It's not a political cycle. It's an ethical cycle. The cycle that needs to be broken is the cycle of altruism, of sacrifice. We need to educate people that there's a better way to live. In a sense, think about what Christianity did 2,000 years ago. It came up with a new idea and it proselytized that new idea. It convinced people that their way of living was better than the previous way of living. And maybe they were right, maybe they were wrong, but they convinced people, and that's how they broke the cycle. They changed the path of the world. A communist did the same thing. Marxists came about and said, the way you're living is wrong. Here's a better way to live. And when they convinced enough people, they got their way. Our job is to, and this is why I do these talks, our job is to convince enough people that we have a better way to live. Better than Christianity, better than Marxism, better than the conventional nothingness that exists out there in the world today. That if people want to live great lives, not mediocre lives, not just blah lives, but great lives, if people want to be happy, be successful, really, really live, we have the tools. And we need to educate them in those tools. So the way to break the cycle is to start with yourself, to start with the people around you, the people that you have to communicate with. Start with your children, and to grow it that way, to grow it, and then of course through educational organizations like you have in Brazil, to teach people about these ideas, and to slowly see them spread and gain an influence. There's no other way. We can't force these ideas because we're against force, right? And force is against reason, and we have to use reason to convince people.
Perfect, perfect. So let me change a little bit the subject, coming more to individualism and the fact that all individuals are different, and that's something good. So I was watching one of your shows these days, and even the book behind you, it says that equal is unfair, right?
Yeah.
Right. Which I agree. I agree with that. Especially because it is inequality that makes people recognize for the value they generated and makes the worst ones chase their revolution and prosper. However, not everyone is born with the same opportunities. Is it possible to compare a child from a wealthy family with full access to education with a child from a family in the slum? In this case, we have an inequality of access to education caused by a government inefficiency. Still, can we keep saying that this equality is unfair, and how to solve it? I mean, if there is a solution too, that's a hard one.
So let me be clear on what kind of equality we mean, right? There is an equality that is fair, that is necessary, and that is political equality. Not equality of opportunity, but equality of rights, equality of freedom. We're all free. Every child born should have the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Every child born should be free to pursue whatever opportunities they have. The kind of equality that's unfair is equality of outcome, economic equality, or even equality of opportunities. Because you ask, do two children have the same opportunities? And I say, no, absolutely they do not.
Please.
I don't know who said that, but not sure what that was. All right, anyway, they don't have the same opportunities. And indeed, those of us who are parents, we struggle to provide our kids with as many opportunities as possible. Not every parent does that, unfortunately, right?
Right. Right.
So the reality is that not everybody has the same opportunities from birth. That's just real. That's just the truth. And the only way to change that, imagine if you wanted to change that. Imagine if you wanted to establish a situation where all kids had the same opportunities at birth. You can't do it. And the only way you could conceive of doing it is to reduce the opportunities of some. But that's wrong. The fact that, let's say, my kid had more opportunities than somebody else's kid is not their fault. They shouldn't be punished for it. And that's why I say equality is unfair. It's unfair to take opportunities from some just because they happen to have them. So we have to accept reality. Not everybody has the same opportunities. What we need to embrace is the idea of maximizing opportunities. We need to embrace the idea of equality of freedom, equality of rights, and maximizing opportunities. So for example, let's take this question of a kid born in the slums of Brazil and a kid born in a upper middle class family in Brazil, right? There are always going to be some poor people, always going to be some people who are wealthier, and they can have different opportunities. But how do we provide the kid in the slum with maximum opportunities? How do we maximize his opportunities? Well, by creating, for example, a thriving economy in Brazil, where there are plenty of jobs, where productivity is constantly rising, and therefore his wages, when he gets a job ultimately, will constantly go up. We haven't equalized opportunities, but we've increased them. Or for example, one of the biggest problems in the world today is the education that poor kids get. They get a horrible education. Who provides them that education? The government. So one of the things that we can encourage in order to increase opportunity is to get the government out of the business of education. It's to privatize education. To privatize education for everybody, including poor kids. Now you say, but how can they afford it? Well, first, education is not expensive. What you need is a teacher, a room, and a blackboard and some chalk and some books. Not expensive, particularly not if it's delivered where the person lives. Second, if we really had economic freedom, then, I mean, all of us could get together and start a foundation that provided scholarships to pay for poor kids to attend private schools. Private schools, by the way, which would be a lot cheaper. But imagine if you had private education. We'd have competition. We'd have innovation. We'd have entrepreneurs, which would drive the cost down. What happens in every market? What happens to cost? Goes down. What happens to quality? Goes up. So the way to maximize opportunities for poor kids is to have a free market, to have capitalism, and to have private education. And if you do that, then social mobility will increase dramatically. Just because you were poor does not mean you have to live poor, does not mean you have to die poor. Because you will have tons of opportunities to achieve things in your life. The problem with Brazil and to some extent America is we suppress the opportunities for the poor. We give them a lousy education. We have an economy that barely grows, so they don't have jobs. When they do get jobs, we don't increase productivity enough, so their wages don't go up. So a mixed economy with lots of statism and socialism actually destroys opportunities for the poor and makes them poorer.
That's, wow. That's I don't even know what to say. That's great.
Well, Equal is unfair. If one of you knows of a Brazilian publisher who wants to publish the book in Portuguese, please write to me because I'd love to see it published in Portuguese. And I think it would have a huge impact in Brazil. Could have a huge impact in Brazil.
I think Henrique, actually, who is the next one with the word, with the speech? Henrique, I think that maybe the IBEF Academy and Leaders of Tomorrow should work on that because that's going to be great. Let's work on it. And Henrique just asked, he raised his hand, so I give you the word.
Go ahead, Henrique.
Hello again, Yaron.
Hey.
Well, ever since I first became aware of Ayn Rand's ideas, it's been like I've been trying to solve some moral and philosophical dilemmas, trying to explain many of the words dilemmas that I encounter on an objective perspective. What are the ideas or moral dilemmas that you encountered and had the biggest effort to solve and understand during your path and all those years studying objectivism?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I grew up in a very collectivistic environment, home and country. So I grew up in Israel. And in Israel, everything is about the state. You're raised to sacrifice for the state. You're raised to die for the Jewish people, right? All your heroes are people who died to save Judaism from whatever. And, my parents were leftists. Everybody I knew was a leftist. Every government in Israel ever had been a labor government, right? All the governments were Labor Party governments. Until the year I read Atlas Shrugged, and then everything changed in Israel. So for me, the biggest challenge in the early years was to really get this idea and to integrate it and to commit myself to the idea that no, I should not jump on the first grenade and sacrifice myself for the state and for the people. That my life was to live for me. So for me, the hardest part was this fundamental idea that my life was mine and I should live it for myself. That was the hardest. And every time I would emotionally, I would want to be a collectivist. I would want to do things that were sacrifices. Like my emotions led me in that direction. And I would have to stop and think, Do I really want to do this? Does this really make sense? Does this make my life better? And I would have to fight my emotions because my emotions were conditioned by my upbringing, by the state, by the education, by my parents. And I had to fight it. And it took years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years before I got my emotions to be consistent with my ideas so that I wasn't seduced by helping other people I didn't like, by sacrificing, by doing things for my family I didn't want to do. Like one of the things about parent-children relationship is, if you're a parent, you owe everything to your kids up until they're 18 years old. But they owe you nothing. They only owe you if you were a good parent and they love you. And then they owe you not out of a sense of duty, but they owe you because they love you. But if you don't love your parents, or if your parents expect you to do things that you don't want to do, you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them obedience. You don't even owe them love. And I know lots of people who don't love their parents because their parents are not worthy of the love. So all of these kind of issues are hard, like the interpersonal issues. How do you deal with parents? How do you deal with the people around you? And then how do you deal with the tug of altruism? Altruism is constantly pulling you because altruism is everywhere in our culture. It's the foundation of our culture. And so to me, that was the hard part to avoid. And altruism, particularly in the form of collectivism, in this idea of the Jewish collective or the state as something to sacrifice to.
I will also complement the question regarding more recent studies, and actually a few decades from now, behavioral economics and behavioral psychology has been debating and explaining why humans are not mostly rational as we think we are. And many people who usually are people that don't know nothing about objectivism, but read some kind of summary of the debate of objectivism and Ayn Rand, they usually use those ideas to argue that objectivism is wrong because it's based on rationality, and mostly humans don't act based on rationality. So how would you explain the perspective of rational interest, and then explicitly the
behavioral economist kind of critique of rational decision making?
Humans are in. Yeah, that's it. That's also a problem that many critics of Mises put on the economic perspective.
Yeah, but it's look. The fact that you're rational doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. The fact that you can be rational doesn't mean you will always be rational. And in a society, so put it this way, rationality is an achievement. Rationality is something to strive towards. Rationality requires effort. Not everybody is rational. You're not rational automatically. It's not like an animal that is, everything's automatic. It doesn't have choices. It just is. And we could have, as human beings, things that make rationality a little bit more difficult. Emotions, biases, confusions, bad education, that creates the biases that the behavioral economists mentioned. But that's the beauty of rationality. It's a self-correcting mechanism. When I read a book on behavioral economics and I learn that I might be susceptible to certain biases, I can then work to not be susceptible to those biases. How do I do that work? By using my mind, by being rational. So rationality is something you have to constantly work at, recognize you might be biased, recognize you might have emotions tugging you in a different direction, recognizing what you know and what you don't know and what the information that's available to you, recognizing you might be risk averse or not risk averse, or risk seeking, knowing yourself, including your so-called biases, and then making the best decision possible. But I once asked one of these behavioral economists, I said, so do you write about this to teach us how to be more rational? And he said, no, you can't be more rational. You just are irrational and that's it. And I said, then how do I know you're rational in describing my irrationality? Oh, because he's special. He's an academic. He's one of the philosopher kings who are superhuman beings. And they look down on us. They think we're these pathetic. No, everybody's capable of it. Doesn't mean everybody will do it. And this is, again, Ayn Rand's achievement. I mean, what Ayn Rand says is, a man is a rational being if you choose to be. Choice is what's fundamental to human beings. And unfortunately, in the world we live in, a lot of people choose not to be rational. We see it every day.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
great.
Thank you for a very good answer.
Thank you, Enrique. Yaron, we have a very special guest here.
Yes, I see.
Roberto
Roberto's
Rachelski. He just got in. Hello to him.
I told him about this event. I told him about this event yesterday, I think. We were.
Yeah, I know. He sent me a message.
Communicating by WhatsApp. So
that's very nice to have him here.
It's nice to see you, Roberto.
I have a question here that someone anonymous sent on Slido, which is, okay, in your view, what is the most difficult part of objectivist philosophy to implement in life? Is there anything that you consider utopic?
No, I don't think anything is utopic in the sense that utopia is something that will never be achieved. And I don't think objectivism is a utopian ideology, even though I recognize that my political ideas will not be achieved in my lifetime and probably not in yours, even though you're quite a bit younger than me, that the political ideas are going to have to be fought for a long time. But I truly believe they will be one day achieved because I think they're consistent with human life. They're consistent with human reason. I think they're true, and I think truth wins out in the end. So I think that the most difficult part is not so much to implement in your own life. I find the most difficult part is to convince other people that it's good for them and that they should embrace these ideas. And to the extent that my life depends on other people, right? Other people vote. Other people interact with me, they affect my life. And it's important for me that they change their mind, that they agree with me at the end, or at least on certain issues. So I find the most difficult part of objectivism convincing other people, convincing enough people. And I think a lot of it has to do with the point I made earlier. People are not automatically rational. They have to choose it. And it's hard, and it requires work, and it requires effort. And most people are not willing to put in that effort. And it's sad and tragic. And we all suffer the consequence of that. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but so in combining this last question, another one here.
Yeah.
How do we do with the politicians? Because it's so hard, maybe even impossible to put a 100% politician aligned with our values. It's kind of maybe utopic to put them in power. How do we do this? Can we be flexible? Can we just choose the best one, or should we maintain our values and be strict to it?
No, you have to choose the least worst. I won't say best because I don't know any politician who is best. I know politicians who are less worse than everybody else. So you have to choose the least worst, or as Ayn Rand talked about it, the lesser of two evils, or the lesser of three evils, or the lesser of however evils they are, right? So the standard has to be, how few bad, how little damage they will do. You want to choose the politician that will do the least damage long term. And one day we will get good politicians. But that day will only come about when we all believe in these ideas. That is, politicians reflect what we believe. We get the politicians we deserve. I hate to say that in an era of Bolsonaro and Trump, but we get the politicians we deserve as a culture. These are the politicians we deserve. And unfortunately for Brazil, you get Lula or Bolsonaro, which is, oh my God, you guys have committed lots of sins to deserve these guys, right?
That's the perfect definition of less
of two evils. I'm not sure. Yes. It's a definitely definition of evils. But when the people want to be free, when the people are willing to be rational, when people want capitalism and free markets, that's when you'll get politicians that want it too. It won't happen before that. You know, von Mises, somebody mentioned von Mises before. Von Mises, the greatest economist who ever lived, in my view. When von Mises was asked once, what would be the first thing you would do if you would become dictator of the world? You could do anything. You a dictator. You could bring about laissez-faire capitalism just like that. What would you do? Anybody know what Mises said?
No.
Resign. Resign. You cannot give people freedom by force. It's meaningless and it doesn't last. So the freedom has to come from the bottom up. The people have to want it. And for the people to want it, the intellectual and business leaders need to want it first. And this is your job, right? You are the intellectual leaders in your city, in broader in Brazil. You're the business leaders. If you stand up and start preaching these ideas, if you start arguing for them, you have a real voice. You can influence people. Most people in the world, unfortunately, are followers.
True.
They're looking for somebody to follow. You guys are the kind of people they will follow. And if we can get enough people to believe in these ideas, the politicians will have to accept these ideas in one way or another. So the only way to get there is to convince enough people. And that's your job.
Okay.
My
Promise
job
I'll
is
do
to
it.
convince you. Your job is to convince everybody else.
I promise I'll do my best. So Vitor Maia, he raised his hand and he wants to make a question. Vitor, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yaron, thanks for the lecture, if I can say so. But actually, it's not a question, but much more towards your opinion, your view on the recent facts that are being running on U.S. Towards since the George Floyd's situation and Black Lives Matter and statues tore down. Statues of Columbus and of some founding fathers, and now towards the Rushmore. How do you see those discussions that being running, and objectively, what a human being who lived in America, who's raised in America, on the values of freedom, should look towards those facts?
Sure. So it's very, very difficult right now in America because it's hard to have a conversation because everybody is so emotional about these things. And, you're not allowed, there's certain things that are politically incorrect to say. So it's hard to have a real conversation and a real discussion about them. So I'll tell you my views. I think what happened to George Floyd is terrible. I think it's clearly police abuse. I think it's clearly they killed him. They murdered him. And the police should go to jail for it. They did something horrific. Did they do it because he was Black? It's hard to tell. We'll have to see if they can see a pattern in that particular policeman's behavior over time. Because police in America have also done it to white people. They've killed white people in ways that are just horrible. So, and I know this is true in Brazil as well. I mean, you have police abuse problems. I remember last time I was in Brazil, there were stories about people getting shot that were just innocent and police just doing stupid, ridiculous things. And it's, when you give somebody a gun and you make them the enforcer of the law, they better be good people. And unfortunately, a lot of people who go become policemen are not good people. And we don't train them properly. We don't give them the right ideas, and bad stuff happens. So first we have to acknowledge there was murder. And okay, so it would be okay if people went out and demonstrated against police brutality. But to establish that police brutality is more against Blacks than anybody else That's an empirical question. And it's not obvious. I'm not saying it's not true, but it's not obviously true, right? There's a lot of questions about whether you can find, particularly among police shootings, real bias. Is there racism in America? Yes, no question about it. There is anti-Black racism, and it's been around in America for a long time, and it used to be really, really bad. And it's actually gotten better, right? In the last 50 years, it's gotten a lot better. Since the 1960s, the amount of racism in America against Blacks has gotten a lot better. So you've got a lot going on here. You've got police brutality. You've got demonstrations and riots against racism, even though racism is in decline. Right? You've got an organization called Black Lives Matter. Well, of course, Black Lives Matter. Who would say Black lives don't matter? But Black Lives Matter is a much more ideological organization than just the issue of police brutality. If you look at the Black Lives Matter's founders, they are Marxists. They believe in destroying the capitalist system and replacing it with socialism. They believe in no free speech and silencing people who disagree with them. They believe in abolishing the police, zero police. I agree that the police need to be reformed dramatically. I even believe that we should shrink the police because, for example, I think we should get rid of the war on drugs. I think we should legalize drugs, all drugs, heroin, cocaine, all of them. And if you do that, you don't need as much police. Half of police resources are dedicated to drugs, right? So there's a lot of reform that needs to be done. But you can't just abolish the police. That's absurd. So Black Lives Matter is wrong on almost everything. Almost everything. Not everything, but almost everything. And then, in the name of Black Lives Matter, in the name of racism, anti-racism, they then destroy statues. Now, look, some statues should be taken down. But there's a rule of law, and they should be taken down by the authorities. I don't like statues of Confederate generals, Confederate leaders, people who fought to preserve slavery. That is disgusting. You're not a human being if you fight to preserve slavery. I don't like Lee, and I don't like Jefferson Davis, and I don't like any of these people. They're evil people. They fought to preserve an evil institution. They didn't do anything good to counter the fact that they fought for slavery. So I'm fine with taking those statues down. Not through riots, not through anarchy, but through a process of demonstration, convincing, arguing, and voting to take those statues down. Now remember, these are public statues. If they were private, it's a whole different story. You can do whatever you want on your private property. But then some of these writers want to take down statues of Columbus. Now, Columbus was a mixed guy. He discovered America and did a lot of good by bringing Western civilization to this part of the world. That's a good thing. He also was pretty brutal. He treated the local inhabitants really, really badly. So you have to balance the two and figure out, when we celebrate Columbus, what are we celebrating? Well, we're really celebrating the discoverer mentality. The person who set sail to undiscovered places, taking all the risk, not knowing what'll happen, and that curiosity and that discovery mentality. We're not celebrating the oppressor that's in Columbus. So I like Columbus sculptures because they remind me of the courage it took to get on a boat, to go discover lands that nobody had discovered before, to do things nobody had ever done before, to sail off. They might have sailed off the edge of the earth. They didn't know. So, and then the founding fathers, that's ridiculous. The founding fathers are the people who made slavery go away, even as they preserved slavery in America, unfortunately. But it is the Declaration of Independence announcing to the world that all men are created equal, that inspires abolitionists all over the world to do away with slavery. Even the intellectuals who are fighting against slavery in Brazil were quoting the Declaration of Independence as the reason why they were fighting against slavery in Brazil. So the founding fathers inspired the world to embrace freedom and ultimately reject slavery. So even though they had this massive compromise, which is wrong and bad, it doesn't wipe out the good that they did in founding America and setting a course for the world that liberated hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. So you have to evaluate them positively overall. So I'm never against destroying sculptures by mob, but I am for taking down sculptures that celebrate evil people. And I consider anybody who fought for the Confederacy evil. I mean, anybody in a leadership position.
Yeah, that's perfect, Yaron. So during your speech, in one part of your speech, of your initial speech, you were saying about how capitalism is the system to increase individual rights, to guarantee that individual rights are
Yes.
well preserved. So, but in one of your shows that I watched it too, you said that we do not live in a capitalist society, that we're not living in a real capitalism.
Yep.
Why is that? And which is the country that gets closer to it, if there is one?
No country gets close to it, unfortunately. And we're drifting away from capitalism, further and further away. America in the late 19th century, after the Civil War, was close. Hong Kong, until recently, was close. That's about it. You know, the countries that have more freedom, New Zealand, Singapore, Switzerland, but they're not capitalist. They're not consistent. They're not consistently free across the board. They're better than the rest, right? So the best countries today in terms of economic freedom are Singapore, Hong Kong, New Zealand, and places like Ireland, the UK, Switzerland, Denmark, of all places. But they're not capitalist. They are mixed economies with a little bit of capitalism and a lot of socialism, a lot of taxes, a lot of redistribution of wealth. Unfortunately, we don't live under capitalism. Maybe one day.
So what you're basically saying is that we are more socialist than capitalists.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Well, that's
over 50% of my income goes to government. Well, before I lived in Puerto Rico, now not a lot goes to government. But when I lived in California, over 50% of my money went to the government. If that's not socialism, I don't know what is. Every decision I made as a business owner had to follow regulations, had to follow government dictates. If that's not socialism or fascism, I don't know what is.
and
So,
what is the,
yeah.
Okay, finish. You can finish.
Yeah, so I absolutely think that we live under, our economies are more socialist than capitalist.
And what's the maximum that we should allow the state to control? I mean, you said that education, no, it should be private. What's the
Zero.
maximum of it?
Zero. Zero. In a sense, the state should control only one thing in principle, and that is the protection of individual rights. So in order to protect individual rights, what must the government do, the state do? 1, police. 2, the military. And 3, the justice system. That's it.
So it's
you need
necessary,
laws.
but only in that.
That's it.
So-
You need laws, but the laws must be limited to individual rights. So for example, no economic regulations, no economic control, 0. Right? So Everything else should be voluntary. And you can see how far away we're from that. I mean, if you look at the number of regulations and controls you have in Brazil over business, I mean,
That's crazy.
you're nowhere near capitalism, even with, what's his name? Getz as your finance minister,
Yeah.
economics minister, you're still socialist for the most part.
Well,
You've got a long, 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 long way to go. And America has a long. I just saw today, America is ranked, according to the Heritage Foundation, number 17th in the world in economic freedom. 17. Denmark is more economically free than the United States, according to the Heritage Foundation. So it's a long way to go to get to capitalism. And Denmark, we know, has huge elements of socialism because they do massive redistributions of wealth. That's socialism. Control of business is socialism.
so feudalism in its origins, that was more capitalist than we are.
What
Because
was
they give
feudalism?
Yeah.
No, feudalism
No?
is worse. We're
Worse?
freer than the feudalist societies.
Okay.
Because in a feudal society, most of the population was completely unfree. They were the equivalent of slaves or very close to slaves.
Right.
So that
Right.
no, we're not that bad. We're not that bad.
Okay, that's good to know. So, what would Ayn Rand say about the COVID-19 situation and the isolation? How would she be feeling now? What would she say?
I mean, she would say that COVID-19 is your perfect example of massive government failure, government panic, government hysteria, government disaster. In a pandemic, the government only has one job: to test, to trace, and to isolate people who have the disease. That's it. And it doesn't do that. It's not doing that anyway, except in Asia. Asian countries have been very, very good. If you go to South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, even Japan, Singapore, even Vietnam has done a better job than the United States of America in dealing with the virus. Instead, what did the government do in the United States and in Brazil? First, they denied that there was a virus. Then they said, oh, no big deal, it's like the flu. Then they wouldn't allow private companies to test. Then they didn't do any isolation or tracking or anything like that. So they panicked because suddenly people were dying. So what did they do in America? Oh, we shut down everything. Everybody, stay home. Can't even walk your dog more than a few feet from your home. Curfew, can't leave the house. Insanity. Complete authoritarianism. So
Do you see the question?
Yeah,
There's a nice question. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a nice question there in the chat. Could the state force people to test to be sure who to isolate?
No, you wouldn't force people to test, but you would expect everybody, and socially we would expect everybody to test if they had symptoms. And we should be able to allow enough testing so that anybody could test. See, I was traveling a lot. So in mid-March, I was still flying around. And I was complaining because what I wanted to be able to test myself before I went on a plane. I wanted then to land somewhere and test myself then. I wanted to be able to know if I had the disease, because if I had it, I didn't want to give it to other people.
Right.
I would have self-isolated. So what the government should have done, and this would have been easy to do. All you have to do is use the market. So here's what you do. You tell companies, develop tests. We're not going to require government authorization for the testing. Test. And you can charge however much money you want for the test. No price controls. So you've got price competition. You've got the profit motive. Every airport in the world would have a company there testing people and charging them for it, right? And most of us would want to be tested. Now, the government could then say, if you're poor, you know, in this world, right? Not in a laissez-faire capitalism. If you're poor, we'll pay for your test. However much the company charges, right? We just did a $3 trillion stimulus plan in the United States, and there's another trillion on the way. So $4 trillion. We could pay for a lot of testing with $4 trillion. A lot of testing. And then you wouldn't have had to shut down the economy. You wouldn't have had to do PPP. You wouldn't have had to bail everybody out, right? That's all a consequence of shutting down the economy. So the solution is let everybody provide tests. Let everybody test. And if you come out positive, the government does have the right to force you to isolate. Because if you're positive, you constitute a risk to other people. Okay. So the way to do that is to ask you to isolate yourself when you test positive. And then if you violate the isolation, then to force you to isolate. Okay, but let's try to make a context like here in Brazil. Okay, either way, it takes a little bit of time to create the test, create the vaccine. Let's say like a month. All right, let's say like a month. I'm not talking about a vaccine. I'm just talking about a test. Okay, let's talk about the test. Let's suppose that it takes 1 month for someone here. But it doesn't. This is the mythology, right? So by the time the United States started to develop a test, there was already a test available. The South Koreans were already testing. The Taiwanese were already testing. Right. In February. All you had to do was license the test from the Koreans and ramp up production in Brazil. And then buy it from anybody who's willing to sell it in the world. Now, you'll get some fraud. You'll get some people pretending they're testing when it's not a real test. Okay, so I would say I'm willing to tolerate some fraud in order to get as many tests out there into the world. But so everyone, every individual thinking of their best self-interest, they should go to testing, because we have some people that they don't have any symptoms. They are 100% healthy. Should these people too go and test? Because if they don't, we have a conflict of interest. Yes. In one way, I have the right. Let's take me as an example. I'm 100% healthy and I want to go out. Why would I take the test if I'm 100% healthy? But I can have the virus, right? So I go out. You don't want your grandparents to get it. You don't want your friends to get it. You don't want your spouse to get it. And you might have it because we know that you could be asymptomatic. So you have an incentive to get a test. Now, the incentive you have to get a test is less than somebody who has symptoms already. Okay. So the first people who should get the test are the people with symptoms. But as production of the test ramps up, then I think everybody has an incentive to get the test. You know, I want to go flying. I don't want to infect the whole plane. You know, people think that because you're an egoist, you don't care about other people. That's wrong. But I do care about other people. I don't want to make people sick. I have no incentive to make other people sick. Right. And if I can get a quick test to tell me if I have the disease or not, why wouldn't I do that? Of course I would do it. So the challenge is, how do you get enough tests out there? And you do that by using the profit motive. You know, people in the United States, there was a period in the United States where there was a shortage of ventilators. Now, why are there never shortages in a market? Because we let prices move. All you had to do to solve the problem of shortages in ventilators is let prices move. If the government had come out and said, you know what, we're willing to pay 2x for ventilators, there would have been plenty of ventilators. People would have gone immediately into production of ventilators, and people would have reallocated ventilators from hospitals that didn't have any COVID to hospitals that did, because they can make money at it. Markets work, and they work beautifully in times of crisis. So, for example, in America, there was a shortage of toilet paper. How do you solve a shortage of toilet paper? You let the price of toilet paper go up. And then what happens? Two things happen. If the grocery stores started charging more money for toilet paper, then fewer people would buy toilet paper. They couldn't hoard it because they couldn't afford to hoard it. But that would send a signal to the people who make toilet paper. There's huge demand for toilet paper. And you can make a lot of money by producing lots of toilet paper. So the producers would have produced more. the consumers would have consumed less until we'd achieved new equilibrium.
Yeah.
So markets work. And the problem is we have laws against price gouging. We have laws against raising prices in times of crises. These are the laws that create the problem.
Perfect. The problem is that we actually have two problems here. First one is the incentive, as you said, to go and make the test. People don't feel like that because they don't have reason. And second is that every obstacle that government brings for improving the market, improving people to reach the test, to reach the ventilators and everything, is caused by the government itself.
Yep.
So he used the obstacles that he created, and he gets everything closed. So I think we have enough time for Lippy to make a question. Lippy, are you there?
Yep.
Go on.
So Dr. Brook, first of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be hearing you here today.
Thanks, Lippy.
My question goes towards the objectivism. So we as humans, we find simple ideas very attractive. So the world becomes very simple. All problems have one single cause, like a government intervention, or one single solution, and that's free market. So looking at objectivism and considering this instinct to look only at a single perspective cause a problem, is objectivism enough to explain humans in a very complex and ambiguous world?
Well, no, but that's not what objectivism is trying to do, right? Objectivism is a philosophy. So it's trying to explain human behavior in one dimension, in a philosophical dimension. I think in the foundational dimensions that all other explanations will depend on, right? But this is why we have psychology, for example, that explains human beings in another perspective. It relies on philosophical foundations, I think, on objectivism. Good psychology would rely on objectivism. But philosophy doesn't explain psychological phenomena. Psychology needs to explain psychological phenomena. Philosophy doesn't explain economics. It is a foundation for economics. So there are lots of sciences, and you're right, human behavior, human interaction is complex. Even human emotions, or how we use our head, mind, is complex. For example, there's a whole science of decision making, which teaches us to be more rational, how to be rational, how to apply it to decision making under uncertainty, under stress, under this, So there are lots of areas of specialization. What philosophy is a foundation for all of that. What objectivism serves is a foundation. Objectivism does not have an economics, theory of economics. So objectivism is pro-capitalism, not because of economics. It's pro-capitalism because it's pro-freedom, right? We need economists to explain economics. So the world is complex, and it needs specialization. It needs lots of different areas in which we need explanations. Absolutely.
Perfect, thanks.
And maybe we've got a time for Evandro.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I was going to say. So let's go for the last question by Evandro, and then I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to, have a final speech. Go on, Evandro.
Okay, so my question was related to like the countries you say that gets closer to capitalism. And then I was in an argument with a friend, and he showed me like that most of the countries that has like the happiest, like the best index of happiness, also have like the highest taxes. So it's like a little contradicted. So I didn't have like many arguments about it. I want to hear like Denmark is example.
Denmark,
like Finland.
Sweden, Norway, Finland. They always use the same examples. Scandinavia. Yeah. So here's the answer. One, I don't trust any index of freedom. A lot of it is cultural. If you ask a Scandinavian if they're happy, they're expected to say yes. I come from Israel, so I'm Jewish. If you ask a Jew if they're happy, they're expected to say no. We're happy? You can't be happy. Nobody's happy. That's a Jewish stereotype. We're all very unhappy people. But that's not real. That's just kind of cultural expectations. It's very difficult to measure happiness. Now, and to separate it out from being content, which is being okay, which I think the Scandinavians are okay. They're all average. Everybody's okay, right? But to be happy is to be happy. It's to live. It's to be excited about life. How many Scandinavians have you seen excited about life? I mean, I know a few, but so I would be suspicious of happiness indexes. But then the other point to make is, yes, Scandinavia has high taxes, but Scandinavia has very low regulations, very low government deficits, very low government controls, a lot of business freedom. So on the economic freedom index I mentioned earlier, Denmark is number 5. The United States is number 17. So yeah, I'd probably be happier in Denmark than in the United States, maybe. I don't really believe that, but maybe. So we have in the world lots of mixed economies, no capitalism, lots of mixed economies. Some mixtures seem to create environments in which people are more satisfied, not happy. But so what? We're radicals. We're revolutionaries. We want actual capitalism. We want people to have real opportunities to pursue actual happiness. There is no country like our country in the world today. And when we have our country, it's going to be a million times happier than Denmark.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to
thank you. That was a great answer.
Really embrace life and are really excited about living. And that's the kind of world I want to live in. Right? That's
great. Evandro now has to know to answer his friends, right? So, Yaron, we got 3 more minutes for you to finish it. And if you can make a parallel with the question that I'm going to ask you right now. Okay. Do you consider yourself a John Galt character?
No. I mean, I that would be so unbelievably arrogant for me to think of myself as John Galt. John Galt was perfect. I mean, he was, what was the description? I can't remember it exactly, but he was a man who felt no guilt, no this, no. I mean, he was just perfect. I wish, no. I want to be John Galt, but I'm not. I think of myself more as a, on a good day when I'm really as a Dagny, right?
Great.
Right. As somebody who's good, who's she runs a railroad. She's very competent, or Reardon, and even that is a little arrogant of me, right? Because they were geniuses. I don't, when I was a kid, when I first read Atlas Shrugged, the first few years I read Atlas Shrugged, I read it when I was 16. I thought of myself as Eddie Willers. Do you remember Eddie?
Yeah.
I mean, a good guy who's not a genius, but is trying to live the best life that he can live in a screwed up world. That's the way I thought of myself. And now I think I'm a little better than that, but not John Galt, Dagny minus, Reardon minus, I'm pretty good, and I'm good at what I do, and I live a happy, good life, but I don't have that internal perfection that John Galt achieved. I mean, I wish I did. And that's what we strive towards, right? And that's what I encourage all of you to strive, what we want to be, what we keep pushing ourselves to be, what it should inspire you is to become a John Galt.
That's all I was going to say now.
In that direction.
That maybe we are not him, but we can pursue to be.
Yes, and you can, and the closer you get, the happier, more successful, more thriving of a life you get. So
I'm sure of it. I
want to just say something to the live streamers. I know some of you asked super chat questions. I will get to them on the next show, so I will answer them. So don't worry. But the focus today was on our friends from Vitoria.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
That was perfect. Can we just? No, thank you for taking your time and giving all your lessons to us. Can we just ask Talita, please take a picture of us, of everyone here, because we have the.
I don't think you get everybody on the screen.
She takes a lot of prints of the screen. Yeah, she goes and takes everyone. So everyone now is smiling.
Everybody's videos on. You should have had the
Right.
videos on all the time, you know.
They should. She's just gonna tell us when she's done. So.
Right.
And you never know when she's taking a picture, so you always gotta be smiling. Okay, acho que, yeah, I think she did it. Yaron, one more time, thank you. I really hope that you have changed everyone's minds like you did to me a couple years ago and like you did to me today. Some of the times that you were with your speech, I was here like, yes, that's what I mean. That's what it should be.
Good.
But we are very British with our time. So thank you. Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I look forward to visiting you all. I mean, Brazil is one of my favorite countries in the world. So I love coming to visit. Vitoria was a beautiful city, and I enjoyed my time there. And Roberto is who is still here, is gonna arrange for me to come. We're planning something, I think, in April, and we'll have to do a trip through Vitoria when I come, and we'll do
That's
an
perfect.
event there as well. And I look forward to seeing you all in person. And maybe you can slowly teach me Portuguese. Maybe.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Good night.
Bye.